Breaking news calls for stopping.
Hey, we are live at DawgsHQ, and Cedric Van Pran is going to return to the Georgia Bulldogs. I'm Wes Blankenship. Palmer Tom's joining me from what looks like a vehicle.
A stopped vehicle. I will note that Jittery Joe's 5 Points parking lot. If you're in the area, feel free to come knock on the window, say hi. But the breaking news calls for hitting the brakes and hopping on with US.
So, Palmer, you covered Cedric Van Pran every availability he had at Georgia. I spoke with him a couple times, but I was just so impressed with this guy's demeanor as a leader for Georgia. And I think, you watch his highlight reel, what he brings to the football field is huge. But can you speak to the presence that will return not only to Georgia's offensive line in 2023, but to Georgia's facility with Van Pran coming back?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. We talked about it a little bit on the podcast the other night. But somebody that was a captain in their third year, not even a junior, he's a redshirt sophomore, to bring back a captain. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of it being that frequent that you have a returning captain. I mean, in all likelihood, will be a second-year captain, 2-year captain at Georgia. I think it's huge. I mean, it is huge, like you said, for the offensive line. Now, instead of having a major question mark in the middle of the offensive line, you've really now only got one position that you're really replacing because Amarius Mims stepped in and started some games for Warren McClendon at right tackle. So now you're really only looking at replacing Broderick Jones on the offensive line because you feel good with Amarius Mims. So it's big. I mean, Cedric is a guy that has played with a chip on his shoulder the last this past season was little ticked off that and I think in the playoffs too last year was a little ticked off that this offensive line didn't win the Joe Moore Award. Certainly felt that way this year, and I think he's going to bring a huge leadership presence as Georgia really, as Kirby Smart has said, is going to have a tough challenge ahead of them of refocusing and getting ready to roll for a run at a three-peat.
So obviously the big change for Georgia will be the quarterback. There's no way around that. Vegas is split on whether or not it will be Carson Beck or Brock Vandagriff. Two different sports books, Caesars and FanDuel, respectively, both list each guy as favorites over the other, if that makes sense. FanDuel lists Brock Vandagriff at, I believe, plus 3,000 to win the Heisman, and Carson at plus 4,000. And then Caesars has Beck at plus 2,000 and Vandagriff at plus 2,500. So whatever you want to make of that, no one seems to know or has a solid guess at who will start at quarterback for Georgia. Either way, whoever it is, maybe it's Gunnar Stockton. You never know. He could end up being the guy at some point in 2023. The fact that Van Pran is back and knows his assignments, knows the culture, knows the expectations of Georgia's offense cannot be overstated.
Absolutely. I mean, I think people underestimate that center position because to me, it's the hardest position on the offensive line to play. I know left tackle is the one that probably makes the biggest bucks because you're protecting a right-handed quarterback's blind side. But to me, center is so important because it's a communication position. It's, like I said earlier, it's the middle of everything. It is quite literally the only player that touches the ball on every single play because you do have direct snaps and stuff like that where the quarterback doesn't touch it. So, I think that from a communication standpoint, it's going to help that whoever it is at quarterback, it's going to help him out having a third-year starter at center that has seen everything possible. I mean, we've talked about all the different types of defenses that Georgia has played, this front, that front, more guys in the, in the box than in the secondary, vice versa. Cedric has seen it all. And so for a quarterback that's taking on a ton of pressure already, he's going to have a helping hand in Sedrick Van Pran. So, I mean, this really, to me, was one of the biggest, if not the biggest decision that could have been made, because it was the one that I felt was up in the air the most, that had the possibility of returning the most, that I felt like if you were going to get one of those people back, you would take Sedrick Van Pran.
Welcome in, Jake Rowe. You had the story. You were covering this. You had your ear close to the ground on SVP's decision all along. He had some different circumstances given the tragedy too, with his friend Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix, and that apparently gave him a little bit bigger window to decide. We actually saw the list of NFL draft entrants a few minutes before SVP shared his Instagram to make it official. But what is your understanding about how this went down for Cedric and for Georgia, Jake?
Well, first of all, SVP, Georgia fans should be saying LFG right now, because this is massive. This is absolutely massive. Listen, I think most of the season, I thought this was a done deal to the NFL. Immediately after the national championship game, heard the same thing. You started kind of hearing him kind of gravitate. It's, you talk to people, and the language we kind of share with fans is not all that different than the language that we get. And that is often, kind of speaking in, I don't want to say generalities, but you're talking about trends. You're talking about which way this thing is moving. Well, it was slowly but surely moving back Georgia's way, kind of day by day. I think things were a little bit more up in the air after the accident. You kind of have to hit the reset button and start thinking about some things, differently. But ultimately, I think Georgia, Cedric loves Georgia. I think that's big, a big part of this. I think he loves being a student athlete. I think he's got a chance to come back and make some money off of his own name, image, and likeness, some significant money. And he has a chance to be the best center in college football. He has a chance to be the best center in Georgia history. He's a real special player. And I wonder if, I just wonder, kind of what, history has a chance, plays, what role history plays in this, and a chance to make it with the three-peat. Knowing what we know about Cedric, I think that kind of thing, appeals to him. I think winning titles and being dominant, and maybe being the guy who snapped the football for three Georgia, titles, and snapped the football for a budding Georgia dynasty. I think that means a lot to that kid. And tell you what, we've talked about, damn good dog, not whatever. I mean, this is it right here. I mean, this guy goes on as one of the best.
Dog for life right there. So I kind of draw a comparison here with Georgia's departures to the draft last season and with the transfer portal. Georgia's losing a lot of talent. It's not talent that they can't overcome or they can't backfill and can't develop. We've seen Georgia do that already. But when you saw Georgia's defense last season lose so many players to the draft, you have a special appreciation for the guys that did come back, like Nolan Smith, like Christopher Smith, and without key position returns like SVP on the offensive side of the ball. I'm not saying Georgia would be in huge trouble, but you're in a different scenario entirely if you're trying to replace a center and a quarterback in the same season.
Yeah, and I think looking at this, it's very similar to the defensive backfield, or just the defensive side of the ball from last year, because Georgia's offensive line, it's the biggest position group on the field when you think about it. There are 5 of those dudes on the field at one time. There's not 5 defensive linemen or 5 wide receivers or anything like that on the field at one time. There can be, I guess you can go 5 wide, but nobody ever does it. Georgia was set to get hurt the most at that position. And think about how hard Georgia's defense would have been hit last year if the Smiths, the Matrix Smiths brothers had not decided to come back to school. I mean, it would have gotten hit even harder. I mean, they had 2 more draft picks from that defense, go in, and those guys would have been justified in going when they went. I mean, I don't think anybody would have beat them up for it. So, Georgia's offensive line was going to get hit hard by this draft. It still has gotten hit pretty hard, but now you're replacing 1, 1.5 instead of 2, 2.5, or 2.5, 3. So it's, with Amarius Mims back, it changes things. This guy right here, though, is the one I feel like I'm going to have this out in just a little bit. So come on over to DawgsHQ and read it. $29.99 until August 31st, 2023. But I look at it like this, guys. Center is the position where if you've got a guy that's a weak link, sprained ankle, he's not a great player, but he's, he knows what he's supposed to be doing, whatever, you can kind of hide him at center. You would double teams and things like that. You can hide a weak link at center, but you can also have guys at that position who make everybody else on the front better.
Yeah,
And
I think a lot of people would be hiding from SVP if they watched his game film over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, and Sedrick Van Pran is the kind that you put him in the middle of it, and he makes everybody better immediately with his ability to communicate. And guys, I really believe this, and this is about as high praise as I can give a player. But this kid's a team captain as a redshirt sophomore. He's a big time talent. He's a glue guy, meaning people just kind of gravitate to him and listen to him, and he holds everything together. But then he's also the kind of guy who will speak up and doesn't care if people get pissed off at him. There's a level of comfortability in that kid's skin that I've seen with Nakobe Dean, and I've seen it with Nakobe Dean, and I've seen it with Nolan Smith. Are the only 2 players I can ever say like that is the vibe he gives off. And yep. Maybe Jordan Jenkins would have been another, but that's probably it that I've ever been around. And listen, I've been around hundreds.
Would the term old soul apply to a lot of those guys? Is that kind of the common thread? Because that's the vibe I get from them.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's absolutely it. There's a maturity, and like you said, like kind of an old soul there. There's wisdom. These guys talk as if they've been raised by their grandparents or something. Maybe they have. But they talk like old folks. They sound like the old head at the Shell station standing outside drinking his coffee, talking about how everything is and will be. And they do it in such a way that you want to sit there and listen to him. And Cedric's good with the media when he wants to be. He can be boring when he wants to be. That's pretty much a sign of strong intelligence there. But he is a difference-making football player, and I think it says a lot that he is 20 years old, I believe 21 years old. Stetson Bennett's 4 or 5 years older, and those 2 are thick as thieves. Yep. So I think, just that age difference and how much he meant to Stetson, that's been huge. And listen, this guy has been a massive part of 2 championships. He snapped the ball for 30 straight games, and Georgia's won 29 of them and 2 championships.
Jake, let me ask you this, because I see it over here in the comments. Zane O'Brien says Van Pran is increasing his draft stock by coming back. Where do you think he would have been in terms of a draft position? Because, I mean, to me, he's probably a day 2 guy, somewhere in that 2nd, 3rd round. Maybe I'm overestimating his draft stock because, 2nd, 3rd round is typically one that goes. But do you think he's somebody that has 1st round potential? And
I think I think he could be a top 50 pick. I think he could be a top 50 guy. And that's kind of how I look at it. Like, I know that, a lot of people are like, not
this year.
Yeah, this year. I think he could be a top 50 pick this year. But I think he has a better chance of being a top 50 pick next year. I think every time you listen, I feel like there's this thing that's like, he's not going to help his draft stock any more than it is right now. That book was out there on a guy like Rennie Curran, and because he was a 5'10" linebacker, and he's not going to grow 2 inches and help himself. That was correct because he was a 3-year starter. Sedrick Van Pran is a 2-year starter, and the more body of work you show, the more opportunity you have to kind of impress them. You show them more consistency. I thought last year he was a little bit up and down. I thought he was a little bit up and down early this year. I thought he finished the season incredible. It was almost the offensive line went as he went, because as he got a lot better, the offensive line got a lot better and got a lot more consistent. And I think a good, strong, dominant senior season with a Remington Award and All-American and all that stuff, all stuff he is 100% capable of. I don't know. Maybe all you need is a team in the first round to need a center.
Yeah,
Get an elite center in the league to retire, and somebody will come in and they'll get the best center in the sport in the first round. And at that point, he's made life-changing money. And obviously, I think all of us just need to kind of, for his sake, hope that he doesn't get hurt. That's just all there is to it. And we'll see how what kind of ripple effect this has on the rest of the roster, because I'm sure Jared Wilson feels like there's one less out to get onto the football field. I'm sure Austin Blasky feels like an opportunity squashed. I had a whole interview with Austin after the national championship game, assuming Cedric was gone, talking to him about kind of what he was excited about coming back and competing, and how he wanted to kind of go about it and what he wanted to do. And it was really good. We'll get to share it now because, we know who Georgia's starting center is going to be.
I don't want to speculate about what kind of impact Devin Willock's loss had on this. There was some, either side of this. Would he want to go to the NFL to move on from this and put it behind him? Or would he want to stay with that connection on the Georgia football team? And wherever he went, just seeing what I saw from SVP this season and the few media interactions I had with him, he's a very strong, faith-driven guy, and I knew he was going to make the most of that opportunity wherever he went, and he was going to mature from it. But I don't think you can overstate that connection on the Georgia football team. We've really hammered that as much as you can, and I think the fact that he's back and he has an opportunity to lead those guys and lead some Georgia players that have already done it and lead some Georgia players that haven't had the opportunity to prove it yet. I don't think you can ask for a better guy to be the first person touching the football on Georgia's offense. I want to hit on a couple more things other than SVP right now before I let y'all go. I know we got a couple more stories to get up. Only take a couple more minutes here. Everyone in my texts responses I'm seeing on social media is, okay, SVP's back. That's a huge piece. But what about Todd Monken?
I haven't heard anything as of this moment to suggest, anything's going on. It's not to say it won't. I'm sure people are going to come after him. I will say that the only kind of vibe I've gotten is that maybe he will get an opportunity that he'll accept, but there wasn't a whole lot of I think he'll take the Tampa job that he was brought up about. I think that's a very tough situation. And if you listen to Todd Monken talk, back at the Peach Bowl, he was talking about grass is greener and making more money and making decisions based on money. And listen, he was very real about all of it. He was very frank, but he also seemed like a guy that, I don't know, man, he likes to win. He likes to win a lot. And I know he's waiting on a new challenge. I know he's going for a new challenge, but it's just tough to imagine everything I've heard about Todd Monken over the last couple of years about, he'd love to go back to the NFL if it's the right situation, thinking that Tampa Bay situation is the right situation because quarterback, receiver, offensive line, running back, all of that is kind of up in the air. Plus, they were a kind of a sub 500 team this past year. I want to say, what did they go, Palmer? Were they 8-10 ultimately or something like that? It was, and then, you're
one of the worst playoff teams ever.
Right. You're a 5-12 season away from, hey, Todd Monken doesn't have a job.
8-10. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's not like there's a lot of rope there to work with. There's a lot of room to play there in Tampa. So I would be surprised if it was that, just using logic, not using any information there. And I've been wrong many times before. He could take the job in 10 minutes. But as of right now, I haven't heard anything that legitimately connects him to him having interest in a job.
Last thing before we wrap up here and let you guys carry on your separate ways, the returns of Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, Tramel Walthour, also big ones for Georgia. And we also got the news today, although we already had a pretty good indication that Jack Podlesny will be leaving as well. So I wanted to make a note of that. Any thoughts y'all have standing out on Walthour, Jack Saint, or Pod's departures, or all the above?
I mean,
Getting
Jake
Walthour and Jack Saint back's big. A lot of experience and 2 physical dudes.
Yeah, I mean, and those are guys that have started games for Georgia. I mean, Tramel's going to have a hard time holding on to that starting spot over Michael Williams. But either way, I mean, it's going to be big to have somebody like that around this program and contributing in whatever way possible. I mean, I kind of look at that as like a Robert Beal type deal where, you know, he may not be your number one guy at that position until you need him.
Yeah.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks for hopping on. Palmer, go get yourself a Jittery Joe's in case this hasn't spiked your adrenaline levels enough.
Go get a haircut, dude. You need a haircut.
You got time to get a haircut now. You don't have to be at press conferences.
Well,
every day.
I mean, I was on the way to get a haircut and then had to pull in Jittery Joe's.
Yep.
As a side note, our graphic, Wes posted our graphic in our group chat, as we're saying, and I believe Sedrick Van Pran has stronger Charmin Bear vibes than Palmer. So
let me pull that up just for a visual reference. Yeah, it's maybe
something. If Palmer just went with the mustache with the Abe Lincoln beard. Palmer, you weren't around when Jordan Hill used to sport that thing. Oh man. Our boy Jordan Hill looked like Abe Lincoln back in the day, dude.
Yeah, that's a Charmin.
Charmin Bear, dude. That's him. Maybe the best center in college football this year. Maybe the best offensive lineman in college football this year. I'm interested to see.
Hey, one thing, he may give off Charmin Bear vibes, but one thing he's not is soft.
He's not soft.
He's not soft, but he's keeping his quarterback's rear end clean. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll catch you again on the Georgia Show at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. Y'all join us. Comments are always going to be active and fun. Maybe not as fun as the last one where we talked about A.D. Mitchell, but a lot to be excited about and look forward to as Georgia's offseason rolls on. There is no offseason when it comes to Georgia football. Back-to-back national champs. Come on, get with it. We'll catch you then. Y'all have a great weekend.